Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 93rd IREPAS meeting. So we will try to quickly explore how macroeconomy affects the loan product market, how global trends turn into local rebar pricing. We start with a GDP forecast, then construction trends, move to production data, review consumption patterns, check out the price dynamics, and wrap up with the strategic outlook. So let's start with the global growth projections. In July, IMF decreased global GDP projection for 2025 from 3.3 to 3%. Please bear in mind, this modest decrease of 0.3% means a loss of 25 million steel of potential steel demand. Looking at the regional patterns, we see that advanced economies are going to increase by about 1.5%, and developing countries are going to go ahead with more than 5% increase. 88% world growth is now generated outside of China, which means a lot of developing economy countries, they are doing really well economically. So let's look at the construction sector. So European construction sector is recovering in 2025, but only in the infrastructure. Cement index is going to increase by about 3%, but all the housing, despite the huge shortages in the European countries, they're not picking up at all. They're blocked by the bureaucracy and red tape. In the United States, it's pretty much the same. The housing starts are actually down around 19% since 2019, despite some recovery in the last year. And again, public infrastructure is underlying the demand with a 14% growth since 2019. In China, situation remains very complicated. So in the property sector, it keeps deteriorating despite various government programs. New starts are at their lowest since 2003, so 22-year lowest. And it seems that there is no hope of recovery at all. It will be very interesting to hear to our colleague, Ms. Zhang Li from Baosteel, to see what the situation is in China, in reality. Really, a light of hope for all of us is India. So India is pushing ahead with a steel output increase of 10% and cement increase of 11%. India really is the only big enough demand engine to offset China's decline. So we should really watch that space, very important. World Steel just published the latest figures end of last week for August 2025. So again, it seems that India is emerging as practically the only country that is increasing its production. So they've registered 10% production increase. And if you look at the volume, India is now producing as much as Japan and Russia combined. And elephant in the room, Chinese steel exports. So since our last meeting in April, China's long products export keep going up. Total export increased by about 10%, but long product export increased by 50% since the beginning of the year. It's true that it's a low base, but it's a 50% increase. Semi-finished products increased by 310%. China is on their way to a record export year in history. So they're going to exceed 2014, 2015 for sure. Okay, moving to the long product consumption. So as you can see, at 2025 numbers, when we look, we can see that long product demand decreased by about 9%. With more and more capacity online, mills must cut costs, volume growth is not coming back soon in any time. Look at the capacity utilization rates since 2019 and looking at the projection until 2027. OECD expects additional 165 million tons of new capacity to come on stream 2025, 2026, 2027. This will really push utilization rates down to 73% for steel mills. It's a terrible number. And there is no hope that it will increase anytime soon. So when you think about price dynamics in the future, think about very short, very hollow price spikes. What will be much more important is the price discipline day to day than one single amazing order. If we look at the consumption of steel long products by product, it's not much interesting here. So we can see that since 2019, rebar consumption increased by about 1%, wire rod dropped by about 3%, and it's mainly because the housing is not being built, and a section increased by around 4%. Okay, looking at the rebar consumption. If we look at the regional consumption of rebar, again, not big change since the last meeting. We can only say that in 2026, India will overtake European Union by rebar consumption. So maybe it's time for all the journalists to introduce FOB Mumbai Rebar Index and get that Indian certification for all the steel mills. Or try to get it, it's very difficult. Okay. Pricing situation. So again, remarkable. The prices just don't change much. They remain flat. Look, comparison to historical, since I think since September 2024, the market remains incredibly stable. This is a graph looking at the spread evolution. If you look at this index, the last 12 weeks out of 24, the spread remained below $200, which is the marginal cash cost for many electric arc furnace mills. And the only way to offset the low demand was the purchase of BOF billets, as we discussed on the last conference. And again, as we discussed, this price stability signals demand weakness. So mills have to absorb all the cost increases, and the sale prices for finished products remain flat. So looking at the summary, the all outlooks. So dear colleagues, to sum up the situation where we are, we're basically having the same old headaches. They simply became larger in 2025. Governments now change tariff rules almost every week. New conflicts can add an extra month to a sea voyage. Tsunami of oil, steel exports keep flooding the market. And there are also fresh non-tariff measures like the EU carbon tax that raise cost for everyone. The problems are the same, they only became bigger now. First is the logistical volatility, because logistics, they first fill international contracts. Geography stays the same, but politics keep changing. A local military conflict can close a sea strait, as we saw with Red Sea, or the dry season can close Panama Canal. And this can add a month to your voyage, can increase your freight cost, and can add $10 premium to the insurance. So keep an eye on the sea route choke points as mapped here. You never know when the next one comes up. We must always have a plan B in advance, and we must keep as many valid certification for our products as possible to diverse. Look at the tariff maps. So this is a map that shows basically tariffs introduced in 2025. More than 70% of global steel demand now sits behind a safeguard, quota, or anti-dumping duty. The best price means nothing if the country quota is full or if your mill lacks the right environmental paperwork. In 2025, lawyers become an important part of your sales team. Make sure that your paperwork is in order. A very important topic, China shock 2.0. A lot of these protection barriers, they aim at one source, at China. We can see that in China, while domestic demand shrinks, factories keep running, and their products keep chasing foreign buyers. The China's first shock two decades ago was about domestic growth in the country. Shock 2.0 is all about these factories in China searching for demand abroad while their domestic demand is going down. What makes this shock very different from early 2000s is a downstream industry displacement. It's not just the cheap semi-finished slabs or billets looking for a home. It's finished goods arriving and completely erasing local supply chains through substitution. In 2025, China will register an absolutely amazing $1.2 trillion trade surplus. At the last conference, it was projected to be at 1 trillion. Now it increased in 6 months to 1.2 trillion. Keep an eye on that surplus, because as long as it keeps going up, there is no chance for a long-term recovery in steel markets. Chinese auto industry is a very good example of this process. China today can assemble up to 55 million cars a year, while its home market can buy around 26. The entire cross-border trade in finished vehicles is around 27 million units. In other words, Chinese plants already have the physical capacity to replace every export car on Earth while still covering domestic demand. For all of us represented in this room, this is uniquely problematic because it's basically displacement without participation. I would guess that not a single person in this room supplies anything to the Chinese steel industry. It means that every Chinese vehicle sold abroad removes roughly 1.2 tons of steel from our markets, tons that we could have sold, multiplied by a record 8 million tons that are expected to be sold in the international market. Add all other heavy industries where China is dominating now. This is why the demand for steel products in our markets is weakening. Europe's answer to the threat of cheap imports from China and displaced imports from other countries is a carbon border adjustment mechanism, CBAM. Starting from the 1st of January 2026, importers in the EU will have to buy EU carbon certificates against all imports. With the current ETS price, it would add around 60 to 90 euros per ton to the price of imported steel. European mills have already been paying the same carbon taxes for many years. So it might feel unfair to some, but it's just a leveling playing field, putting the same pricing mechanism for everyone. Importers, when they import steel, they will have to provide verified EPD, environmental product declaration, with carbon emission data. If no data is given, a high default value of emission will apply. The tricky part, which people kind of don't realize, is that the actual price of the certificates is floating, it's not fixed. And the final price applicable to import on the 1st of January 2026 will be known on the 1st of April 2027. That creates a huge uncertainty. A 30 euro change in the price of ETS during that period can easily add 20 euros to the cost of CBAM, which will be payable. Many countries are watching how this mechanism will work in Europe, and I believe that it will be finally adopted in many other parts of the world as well. Not all the news are negative. a very interesting fact that in the United States, the digital economy is actually emerging as a major steel consumer in 2025. So in 2025, the first time in history, more steel will be used to house artificial intelligence than humans in the United States. So the way to think about it is that each gigawatt of IT load requires around 500 to 700,000 long steel products. In 2025, USA data centers will absorb around 1.5 million tons of steel, more than the residential building with 1.3 million tons. This implication goes beyond a single year curious fact. Data center demand is very different from housing. It's counter-cyclical. What does it mean? The data center demand is undersigned by multi-year cloud service contracts, not by consumer demand, not by consumer sentiment. So demand for data centers doesn't depend at all, for example, on the interest rates. Also, this demand is very local. Data centers are built close to the end users because of the security and because of the regulatory reasons. When these projects are built on national soil, the long steel they require is sourced locally. This gives additional protection from local mills and helps them to fight the global oversupply pressures. Easy way to think about it is that each picture of a little cute kitten like this one, which is generated by AI, generates approximately 0.2 grams of steel demand. Reality is, it's less than half a paper clip, but billions of clicks turn into trucks and vessels full of steel. Competitive advantage for steel suppliers in this new economy, new digital economy, changes from the lowest, cheapest price to the lowest friction. What do I mean? The mills have to be local. The mills have to provide good carbon emission value, and they have to prove their melt and pour clause. And this will help them defend their margins. So, please, click responsibly, but click a lot. This is it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alex. Any questions for Alex from the floor? Rami, can we have the microphone? Here, please.
Thank you very much, Alex, for the great presentation. And thanks a lot for draw the attention for the shift in demand. So demand is not classical anymore. And, we are lucky that we are started to benefit from the service economy boom. So that's a good one. My question would be with regard to the trade remedy measures of the European Union. So if, to be honest, if we are seeing that everything is flat, why really, let's say some of the European producers are pushing for more harsh trade remedy measures? So in any case, we see that, demand is more or less flat. Prices, you are saying that surprisingly it's flat. So would it really needed to take like more harsh trade remedy measures from the EU while the quota was already in place?
Well, maybe, thank you very much for a very difficult question. Maybe the way to think about it is that in different parts of the world, a different route towards steel pricing is taking place. So you've got the traditional, let's say, volume, lowest price production, like, for example, the way Asian mills are built, or the way mills are now built in the MENA region, or our traditional Turkish colleagues, the way they operate. You operate the volume, lowest price, you win. Unfortunately, in the European Union, the United States, with the, I would say, the excessive regulation from the government, pushing for decarbonization, we have been paying, as European supplier, carbon taxes for 10 years now. And what you see now is basically European suppliers, they are not able to compete with the lowest price anymore. And so what they are asking the government, they're asking to level the playing field for them. So if people have to sell to the lucrative markets of Europe, Northern America, local producers are asking, if you regulate us, please regulate everyone. So that's the way to think about it. I think it's a fair way. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Phil? Here. Here.
Sorry.
Let's have Phil first, and then I'll give it.
Alex, hi. I'm going to give some free advertising to somebody I met last night at the cocktail party, a very interesting man who you can all meet if he's here, called Nicholas Endres, who works for a company called ClimeC. That's right, Nicholas. Now, Nicholas told me something last night which is different to what you just said, Alex, and indeed I thought exactly what you said about CBAM, and demonstrates to all of us just how complex this CBAM is. So my understanding was the same as yours, which is that the prices will not be set until April of 2027, because you can only buy the certificates in February of 2027. What Nicholas said, and I don't know if he's in the room, if he is, perhaps he can stand up and comment on this, is that that is not correct, and that the pricing is fixed at the end of each quarter next year, going back a quarter, even though you can't buy the certificates until February 2027. So if you import steel in the first quarter of 2026, in April of 2026, the price of certificates, CBAM certificates, will be set based on the average price from January to March 2026. So you know what you're going to pay, still in the future, but not quite as far as in the future as it might be. And that will carry on for each quarter for next year, and then you eventually buy the certificates in 2027, which is different to what you just said, and indeed what I thought until last night. So it'd be perhaps useful to get some clarification from Nicholas, because I think it's relevant to all of us, if that is the case.
Thanks, Phil, for this clarification. It's very, very possible. So it's a very confusing system. Let's say the guidance has not been published yet. There is a lot of confusion on the benchmark, on the way the system is going to work, on how the offsets will be done. And it's true that you can buy it, and I understand also that you can trade it, no? You can hedge it. But that still we will see how it's gonna, how can I say, I'm not gonna insist on my version, because that's our understanding, is what our consultants are telling us. But let's see how it's gonna play out, and I'm sure in Amsterdam we'll have a lot of fun discussing how it actually.
Well, I mean, it's quite shocking that here we are in September 25, and none of us know how this is going to be done in January 2026. And even different consultants may be seeing different things. But Nicholas, do you want to comment on this? Because I think this is really important. Maybe if I can, just pass the microphone to him.
Thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Does it work? Thank you for putting a little bit of weight on my shoulders here. Yes, so even though it's not a confirmed part of the regulation, the EU is planning to base the CBAM price for 2026 on quarterly average prices. So you need to wait until the end of Q1 2026 to have the confirmed price for 2026. So theoretically, you only have to wait until April 1st, 26. And then starting from 2027, the CBAM price will start to be based on a weekly average. So then you only have to wait until Friday to know the price.
Well, that means,
but again,
make it
to
very
be confirmed,
easy.
Probably.
No, it's any changes are possible until end of 2025, because there is a lot of pressure from the different parts of the industry to the European Commission to adjust this in one way or another. But the problem is, you've got a pressure to abandon CBAM, to delay CBAM, and all kinds of things. but it's a law in the European Union. So how they would be able to change it, I'm not sure. Okay, so we'll just have to see how it unravels and see how, you know, what will happen. Everyone is watching it, and I think it's very important how we will, you know, how it will eventually plays out.
Thank you very much. It is really shocking that it is still unclear. Can we have one final question here? Yes.
Thank you. The question is, you mentioned the range of the cost of CBAM certificates within 60 to 90 euros. Earlier, we heard at fast markets around 60 to 70, but there are two different ways of steel production, and EAF route gives less emissions. So will there be just this pretty narrow range, or it will be different for EAF producers supplying to the EU and blast furnace producers?
Thank you, Vlada, for another difficult question. So again, so we have our opinion, the way it's going to be mandated in the European Union, but it might change. So I will give you basically how we understand it. There is going to be two routes of production, and CBAM will be decided on the route of production. Blast furnace, electric arc furnace. Blast furnace is going to have one benchmark, electric arc furnace is going to have another benchmark. And any product which will be sold to European Union will be decided whether it's blast furnace route or electric arc furnace route. And based on that, the final numbers are going to come up. The numbers that I cited, 60 to 80 or 60 to 90, they are based on certain assumptions like ETS price, like values of emissions that you know, I have seen in the EPDs for different mills, but it can be different because it's widely understood that the benchmarks are not published. They are actually published because European mills have been working with these benchmarks for a very long time now. And so if the published benchmarks will be different than the ones that I apply to European mills, that will be questionable, let's say. So let's see how it plays out. Numbers can vary. Maybe, for example, electric arc furnace based in Turkey will have a very low CBAM because the numbers for the scrap based EAF furnace in Turkey, they're not that different from the European numbers. But let's see how it you know, what will happen at the end.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Alex, I think it's time to save you from these CBAM questions. Thank you very much.